If your managers only think that your residents are their only client, you have a problem. If your regionals think the only client is the employees and the residents, you have a problem. Everybody in the party needs to understand that your clients start with your investors all the way down and include your vendor partners. With inflation, with limits on rent, with limits on income, you put all these things together and we're just in a nasty place because how do I pay you better? How do I compete in a world that's limiting me in so many different areas? Long gone is, can you interview with me on Friday and it's a Monday because by Wednesday, somebody else has hired you. Biggest thing is be willing to be uncomfortable and be willing to be wrong. I am wrong all the time and I'm not shy about it. So just be willing to be vulnerable because people love to know that you're human. And that's what I think creates some of the best relationships is the fact that we can all sit back and go, well, crap, that didn't work. What's next? Let's figure it out. Let's get there together.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Multifamily Hangout. The two hosts are in Denver at the conference today. So broadcasting from Denver, what you see, my background is a real background, and it's from Denver, Colorado. So excited to be here. I'm your host, Adrian Danila. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors from Kairos and Coastal Painting Contractors. With this, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Chris Moreno. Take it away, sir.
It's great to be remote today and to have our guest with just a storied career and to dive in a little bit more about what she's working on, what she's done, what she's excited about. So thank you, Jennifer Sutter, for joining us today. A property management career starting from 1995. She's got extensive experience and dedication to multifamily. And her portfolio covers conventional to tax credit properties, as well as with owner and third-party management. Jennifer also has a ton of experience in workforce housing and a track record of really being able to reposition distressed assets. Before Acento, Jennifer held numerous leadership roles at different organizations before she can talk about. And she really has a dedication to excellence. And she has multiple certifications from ARM to IRM and others. So without further ado, I want to welcome you, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us today on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. You started off in 1995. How the heck did you fall into multifamily? Did you fall in? Did you have a plan? Tell us more about that.
I think I'm the exception to the rule. I hear it all the time. People have conversations and they say, they got hired from here or they accidentally fell in or they had a summer job. And I think I'm the rare exception that, I was born and bred for property management. And so, my mom was a property manager and I grew up with a single mom in property management. And in that day, you went to work in the summer with your mom and you swam at the pool and you did all those things and saw everything she did. And so I saw it and it was wonderful. I was a kid and my mom ran this business and, she had all these people and, that looked up to her and needed her. And so it was, I was kind of destined to do it, I think. And, ultimately, when I was 18, she had a company that she worked for. She'd been with for, 20 years and they had two properties, a small owner and other property that was with the company. The manager was leaving and she was retiring. And I said, I want it. And everybody thought I was crazy. And so I called their corporate office and said, hey, Jake, the owner. And I said, hey, I want it. And he interviewed me, which is funny because it's the same guy who knew me since I was a toddler. And I got it. And it was amazing. And it was like, hey, we'll give you a chance. And who does it to somebody at 18? I'll take a property at 234 units at 18. And, thank goodness for my mom and her reference, I guess. But, I got in there on my first day and I closed the door and I called my mom and I said, I got it. And now what? Because I had no idea what I was doing. And, that's kind of been, I think, the trend of my career is just, get it and then figure it out. And that's what I did. So here I am.
Jennifer, you were destined for property management, for multifamily, unlike most of the other people that I know, included. How do we turn the tables and we make this the rule, not the exception? How do we act? How do we plan? How do we execute to get people into the multifamily because they wanted to have a career in multifamily, not because accidentally they just kind of discover multifamily?
I think that's just such a great question. And I think it's exposure. If it's funny because when I was it's a different world now because there's organizations, there's associations, there's the internet, and there are college courses even that you can, learn to do what we fell into or were destined for. But I think, it's exposure. There was a time where, when I said to people, I was in property management, and they were like, "You're doing what?" And I was like, I work in apartments. And they're like, "Well, what do you do with them?" As if these buildings just ran themselves and rent checks deposited themselves. Right. And, I think people just assume that if they live at home or they live in an apartment, they forget these people, these are jobs and these are career opportunities. And so I think it's really exposure. We keep going out and convincing people that we exist and we're worth taking a chance on. But what we're not doing, I think, is expanding the education of what we're doing, going to schools, going to more than just, Virginia Tech is a fabulous program, but going to more schools, having more property management programs, going to more tech schools, talking to more colleges, talking to more high schools. We have incredible opportunities, well-paying jobs, fabulous benefits, the opportunity for housing included at some degree. And so I think it's just really getting the word out in a better and more meaningful way instead of hoping people stumble upon us with some desire or some need. We're getting bigger and we're getting better, but we need to do more and we can continue to improve.
I'm curious on, obviously focusing, on the growing affordable housing crisis. You've got a lot of experience in this sector and with Acento. I'm kind of curious how you're addressing the challenge, particularly in workforce housing, maybe any innovative solutions you're thinking about or implementing to meet like regulatory requirements or market demands.
It's tough. It's really tough. There's a great need and there's this balancing act. And I think we hear about it everywhere. We need affordable housing. There's limits on what we can do and regulatory guidelines that cap us. Whether those tie together and satisfy each other is a different conversation. But then on top of that, there's inflation. And so, we've got to do it, run it, do it well, do it cheaper, and still be able to provide housing at an affordable rate. And so it's a constant balancing act. And I think, ultimately it's getting harder and harder. And so we have to be more flexible. And it's not everywhere. We're seeing more this year where we once maybe saw a rent cap. Now we're seeing rent caps that even just recently came out, in Maryland, where it's not just a rent cap in an area. It's your limitations on market rent, on renovations, on renovation timeframes, on, your returns and whatnot. So, how we do business is entirely changing. So, I'm finding that, we do need to keep it affordable and still maintain the community, which is a balance in and of itself. But ultimately, what that means is, I've got to balance expenses more than anything right now. And, a lot of that is partnerships and how I'm navigating the savings and, turnover and really ultimately retention until we start to really figure out like where it's going to end up and how that's going to navigate. Because I think everybody's trying to fix it, but nobody really is.
You mentioned the situation with, rent control, with rent caps, challenges. Obviously not very appealing for investors, for an owner manager like you. I do want to bring another current challenge that, we're facing. Most of the population is facing inflation and rising costs. Given the current, inflationary environment, what are some specific strategies you've been implementing to manage rising operational costs while maintaining profitabilities in your properties?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've taken a look, especially this last 12 months, and just, how do we do the best business and partner, in partnership with our vendors? And it's looking at every single service that we have. First, do I need it? Do I have to have it? Is it value add? And there are some things that we have just simply cut off the top, because if I have to choose between taking care of my residents' profitability, taking care of my investors, then if it's not bringing value, then we just have to make business decisions. But ultimately, then it's just looking at buying power. And this year, we've made some changes in our size of our company. We just aren't at a size where we have buying power. And so we're looking at partnerships like, our new partnership with Connexus, and saying, hey, you have buying power. Let's negotiate our contracts on a big nationwide level and in a bigger way so that we can save money. And so we're doing good business by these vendors, but we're also still getting quality services and part of a bigger global bidding process. And so we're able to save some money in all of our services. And so while it may be, 1% here, 2% there. And in some properties, in some areas, it's, bigger. It adds up. And ultimately we're seeing savings, from those areas.
That's great to hear, giving you an advantage with these different technology partners. You think about technology, what is the process? And maybe your process has evolved, but how do you think as a leader, within your organization about thinking about technologies? And then the right time and the right place, and maybe how to think about implementation. Do you give your teams the opportunity to go out and find and discover new partners? Or do you kind of have a team that really does focus on those things for you?
We're a smaller but quickly growing company. And so, we don't have a team that goes out and does that. I think a lot of times we send our team members out and they do go to events. They go to, the NAAs, they go to the PMAs, they go to the expos, they go and see these other things. I like to think I keep an eye out. And then vendors, approach me as well. But ultimately, I try to focus and look at what do we need. I've never been one that, buys into everything that comes out. I just don't think it's in our best interest. And I like to think that vendor partners respect the fact that I'm candid with them, that says, your thing is great, but it's just not for me right now. It's not where we are. It's not where I'm focused on, but I do seek out, what is making our lives difficult? What could take, is taking too much time or could save time? What's costing us too much money? What can I consolidate? And then, we're then looking into those things. So whether we find it, whether we, whether we're going out and finding it, whether it's finding me, ultimately, we're looking out for what's going to make a difference and then making decisions based on that. I'm not changing something that's not broken. There's too many things that will always need to be improved for me to go seek out something to change and spend time on. But, with that, there's always a need. And so, we found we were very light for a couple of years. There's always something out there that's going, and there's 10 of them and they're going faster than we'll ever be able to keep up with. But we're gauging what those things are as they come and then letting someone else beta test them. Then we're doing references and then, seeing if it's a fit for us and then putting them into place.
So not an early adopter.
No. I mean, I'm a second phase early adopter. I'll take it after someone else has already gotten the kinks out of it, and I can make sure and I say that with the best intent and the most loving heart, your integrations and your seamless process works. I want to make sure that happens before my teams have to fight through that.
I think everyone in operation acknowledges that, if we were to be very honest with each other, that there are major challenges in implementation and, all sorts of things. And it's not easy to be the first one to embrace it. It's probably not a bad idea to wait a little bit until, the kinks are worked out of the system. So it's a better experience for you. Now, Jennifer, I wanted to stay a little bit on this relationship with supplier partners. And part of our audience consists of supplier partners and individuals that work for them. At times, very hard to get in touch with an executive like you and just have a conversation. For that reason, on their behalf, I want to ask a question, right? If I was to be a supplier partner today and I have a meeting with Jennifer in 30 minutes and I would ask you to coach me how to approach Jennifer, what would be the best way to approach her in regards to my services and products? How would you coach me? What are some pieces of advice that I could actually use to be successful and hopefully, have a chance at Jennifer's business?
It's probably one of the most incredible questions I think I've ever been asked, because it's client-based. And I think that's the approach. It's, I think the most successful people when they come to me, and I think probably likely when they go to most people, are the people who come and say, what is the challenge you have? And then they try to work to solve that. When you come to me and want however much time, and it's to throw everything in the kitchen sink at me, you've lost me halfway through, because, my time's valuable, and really so is yours too. If you're going to spend 30 minutes talking to me and I need 5 minutes of your time because I have one problem and only really want one solution, let's save both of us a lot of time, because there's somebody out there that needs that other 20 minutes. And so I'm a very right up front, I want to look out for me, but I want to look out for you. Really ask me what I need. Ask me how you can help me, save time, save money. Ask me how you can partner with me to solve for my needs, and I'll give you that answer. And then you can get right to that point and we can solve for that. And from that relationship, you'll have the opportunity to talk to me about the 20 other things that you might be able to do. But ultimately, I think my biggest challenge is when someone wants to throw everything at me in hopes that something sticks, because then I'm just somebody else that you're talking to, hoping to get something from. You're not really interested necessarily, or at least I may not feel that you are, in what my actual needs are. And then I can't look out for you either. And that's really what the partnership is all about.
That's great. And when thinking about partnerships, you've obviously spent a lot of time, as you talked about education, but partnerships with NAA and NMHC, and you mentioned IREM. You have a lot of experience. How do you think about where you spend your time with these organizations on advocacy and partnering up with others when there is a call to action or need help in the industry? Where do you focus your energy?
I'm not the best. I think knowing where you fit and knowing who you are and knowing what you're good at matters. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I'm not going to fit every bill. I'm not going to solve every problem. And I'm not the person you want in every forum. And I think nobody is. And I think part of that is knowing that and understanding that. I find things I'm passionate about, and I find things that I believe I can impart energy and wisdom or creativity into, and then that's where I'm going to get my best results. And ultimately, a lot of times, especially with organizations that I've worked with, it's been community service, or it's been organization, or it's been operations, it's been leadership roles, it's been executive forums, it's been policies, procedures, advocacy in those areas, because those are things I'm really passionate about. I can work in any place, but if you want the best of me, it's those places that my passions lie. Finding people to go in those other places, and those things that are not necessarily my forte. I think just knowing where you work best, and then being able to say that. People come to me for stuff all the time, and I'm like, hey, that's great. I can help you find somebody, but I'm just not the best person for that. And I don't need to be. I just need to be able to help you find that person, maybe, or be candid with you and tell you that it's not. But yeah, I like to find those things that I can have, hopefully all of them, that I can impart some wisdom, some experience, and some passion, and a little bit of fun with.
I love this, not trying to be all things for all people. Labor shortages, Jennifer. Our industry, just like many others, is experiencing labor shortages. What are some strategies? How do you address these challenges within your company, and especially in maintenance, I should say, because I think that's more than ever a larger issue than just general employees? And what long-term solutions do you see emerging for addressing this issue?
I think everybody's feeling that pain, and has been feeling that pain, for a long time, but especially the last few years. It's been a challenge. Honestly, I think that, again, it's no secret, COVID brought the reality to the forefront that, maintenance team members with us, we were not their only choice. We were not the only option out there. Every vendor that comes to our property is another option for them. And so it's become a highly competitive market, not only amongst property management companies, but amongst our vendor partners, amongst even training facilities, are now hiring our team members. We're up against some really competitive markets. And especially, when we start talking about a competitive market with a limit, with inflation, with limits on rent, with limits on income, you put all these things together and we're just in a nasty place, because how do I pay you better? How do I compete in a world that's limiting me in so many different areas? It's a challenge. And I think, the first thing that, we do, and that I'm always for, is retention. If I don't have to fight for the next person, and I can take care of the people I have in place, then that's my first avenue always. And so it's not just pay, it's environment, it's culture, it's, how I take care of you with my value, with hearing you. Do I know what you want? Am I training you? Am I supporting your training? Am I supporting your future? Do I know where you want to go? Do I have a place for you? Do I have a plan for you? And so, to me, the labor shortage starts with, why do I have that opening? And can I do something to stop it? Because, that person leaving me is going somewhere else. And so to me, it's culture first. It's benefits. It's, hearing them and making sure that I know what they're looking for and what they want. Second to that is, am I paying fair wages? Am I including them in bonus structures? Am I really looking out for them where they are? Ultimately, if I have an open position, it's being market competitive. Am I really expecting someone to come to me who's going to be on call, which is now a challenge. A lot of maintenance team members coming now don't want to do on call. And that's just part of our norm. And so we are looking at that as well. Like, is that going to go away? And tons of companies are finding alternatives to that too, because that's a disadvantage. There are lots of industries that don't require that. And so, we're having to shift benefits, after hours, on call, workload on the property, even, do I have to adjust the number of people I have on a property and staffing because of the expectation? But then we're also having to look in different places. People aren't just walking in your door anymore and asking for a job. So we're going to tech centers. We're having to outreach and look in different places and find them, not just hoping that they're applying to us. And then act quick. Long gone is, can you interview with me on Friday? And it's a Monday, because by Wednesday, somebody else has hired you. And so there is no luxury in any position anymore. So it's be fair, be smart, and be quick, and don't expect for somebody to fall in your lap, because it's not going to happen. You have to find them, to some degree as well.
I'd like to follow up a little bit here, Jennifer, in the same line, and ask you, do you think that a Uber-like hiring model could work in an industry? You work very well for Uber, building a platform where anyone that wants to make extra income turns the switch on, works for a few hours, makes enough income that they need, turn the switch back off, and goes back home. There's no boss involved, no friction, nothing, right? Basically, do you think that something like that, first of all, is necessary in our industry to supplement this, this labor shortages? Second of all, is it possible that we eventually get to that point, given the, the employee preferences, the different preferences, the way COVID changed things, the remote work, the gigs, they're like a real thing available as an alternatives for, the regular 8 to 5, 9 to 6 jobs.
It's an interesting thought. I'd never thought about it in that way. It's kind of a spin on the, temp services. Even now, finding temp services, you call our industry temps, and finding somebody is pulling teeth. It's 4 days later, and we hope they're even hoping their interview shows up. And so I definitely think it's an interesting model. Do I think it's necessary? Absolutely. I would love to see it happen. Every liability and insurance part of me going in occupied units triggers, and, but I think where there's a will, there's a way. But I do think there's definitely a need to fill in the blanks, whatever those blanks are. And those blanks sometimes aren't even the blanks, like we have an open position. Maybe we have somebody who's out and they're injured. Maybe we have an acquisition and I need people and I just don't have them on the spot. And so the need isn't just an open position, but yes, there is absolutely a need, and there's a solution that's needed. And, we're looking at options for, we have floating team members, and they're just such a blessing, both in maintenance and in office. And it alleviates a lot of stress, and they know us, which makes it wonderful. They can do things that temp team members can't do. But I would love to see a solution out there that could provide more on the spot, on the fly, be able to get us solutions quicker. I don't think we're going to see an end to this anytime soon.
And now a word from Dean Fungawing, founder and CEO, Kairos.
We combine a wide area network on the property that's very, very light infrastructure, incredibly easy to install. We're not talking about putting base stations and network equipment in every apartment. We're talking maybe 5 to 7 base stations across the community. I can blanket the community with coverage, wireless coverage. And that wireless coverage is then used to take all of that sensor data, whether it's leak sensors or water meters or occupancy sensor, whatever kind of sensor you want, temperature, humidity sensor. And those sensors are then going to those base stations and transferring all that data to the software layers and services. And that from that software dashboard, the notification engines will kick in to then notify the site team. So again, nobody really wants to use another piece of software, right? Like you guys got plenty of software to do. And last time I checked, like no one wants to sit there and stare at a fire alarm waiting for it to go off. Our technology is incredibly unsexy in that regards. You won't want to stare at an app waiting for it to go off. But when it does go off, this is mission critical stuff.
Definitely a challenge. Some people want stability and consistency. They were talking about that actually today here at this event in Denver around how do we retain, and everyone on stage said, we want to figure out how to retain our employees more and more and more, because the cost of every new person, skyrockets. It holds back the business. All that knowledge goes with them. So to your point, I did want to ask you a little bit about, how you think about leadership. And I give you an opportunity to even call out some of your mentors and maybe some stories of some people who made a big impact on your career, and and how you think about mentorship.
Oh, goodness. I have been so lucky. I think first I say I've been lucky. I've never had a bad boss, and I've never worked for a bad company. And I think I attribute that to the fact that I learned very early on that people interview me, but I interview them as well. And so I choose where I put my name. I choose where I put my career. I choose where I put my heart and my soul. And, anybody who's met me knows my passion is property management. I love every aspect, even on the bad days of what we do. And so with that, I'm always making sure that my vision and who I am aligns with the direction that I'm going in. And so I've had some incredible people along the way who have pushed me in directions I didn't think I necessarily wanted to go in, and who have challenged me. And, some of them, even start with my mom who said, hey, like, yeah, you can do this and here's how you do it. And was the first one to tell me I was wrong. And, hey, here's how you do it right. But ultimately along the way, starting out, gosh, I feel aged every time we say 1995 and we start adding decades. But in California with Sunrise Management, I had probably one of my best regional managers, Patrick Diskin, was wonderful. He was actually retired and then came back out and became a leasing agent and then worked his way up. He was like, I don't want to do anything in leadership anymore. He was in his 60s and then got to be a regional manager, and he was mine. And he was one of the first people that worked for me that taught me not to sweat like the little stuff. And I didn't know what I didn't know then. I was a property manager, but, I didn't know how to not sweat the big, the little stuff. And so something would happen and I'd call him and I'm like, this thing happened. And he's like, is it really that big? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, why? What's going to happen? If you didn't call me, what would have happened? And then I'd talk through that and I'm like, wow, that was really silly. Okay. And so I've kind of started to, that's one of those things, those little tidbits I've taken along the way. And so people call me and they're like, this crazy thing happened. I'm like, is it really that crazy? And I have these theories with my, my teams, fire, flood, and blood. That's about it. That's the only thing that's really should be freaking you out, and still we'll figure it out. And so that was impactful. He taught me how to just not sweat the small stuff and really just take it a day at a time. And I love that. Fairfield, whole different journey. I went to the big wigs then. It was like, oh, I wasn't small time anymore. I was like, oh, I worked for a big company. And, I had a regional manager, she was wonderful, Gail Philo, absolutely fabulous. And she believed in me enough on this little property that, then she ended up giving me my first lease up. Was not my forte, by the way. I learned then that I could do a lot of things and I could do it, but I didn't love it. Not like I do distressed assets, but she taught me to think bigger. She taught me that, I could do this and just be settled with it and be good at it. But did I want to just do that, or did I want to try something new that I didn't think I was going to be comfortable with? And I learned a lot from that, and became a little uncomfortable and became okay with uncomfortable. And then I would say, one of my best experiences was with Harbor Group and my regional there, Michael Hess, who I didn't want to be a district manager. Had no interest in doing it. I wanted to be a property manager until the day I died, and I was totally fine with it. And I did all our due diligence and acquisitions and takeovers. And then, he said that he saw something bigger in me, and I didn't want it. And he said, just give it a shot. And then I did, and I loved it. And, he sold me on the idea that if what I loved, I could do on that property. And if I could teach other people to do it in a bigger way, if I could have my impact be bigger, what would that be like? And so I took a leap that I was afraid to take, and it worked, and it was wonderful. And so there's so many people, I think we all have so many people along the way that if we stop and think about, like, got us to these points and taught us different things that, I live by today, and then, VP, Donaldson had the faith in me and took me from regional to VP, and, Scott Jones was wonderful in that. And yeah, I've just had a lot of amazing experiences, and Acento giving me this opportunity to build out their company. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey with a lot of leadership along the way that's made me who I am.
Jennifer, amazing career, amazing leader. There's so many people looking up to you. What are some pieces of advice that you have for someone that, wants to become like you, wants to become Jennifer one day?
My first is always just, ask for what you want. Nobody's going to hand it to you. And that's anybody in any position, no matter what it is. Ask for what you want, know what you want, really think about it, but ask for it. And, I learned along the way. I mean, I would not be sitting in the place that I was in. Yeah, people believed in me along the way and gave me guidance. But ultimately, the position I have now is because I asked for these things along the way, because I fought battles for myself, and I was resilient. And so I would say, ask for what you want and be willing to be uncomfortable. Biggest thing is be willing to be uncomfortable and be willing to be wrong. I am wrong all the time, and I'm not shy about it. Anybody on my teams will tell you, like, I call myself out more than anything else. And I'm okay with that, because I don't need to be right. I need to have tried. And those are, those are different things. Like, I'm willing to take a risk as long as I'm taking it for the right reason. And so I think as leaders, be willing to take risks, be willing to be wrong, be willing to fail, and, and then be willing to be vulnerable. Like, I think I see so many people who in leadership positions are on this pedestal, and people think that they don't make mistakes. And there's nothing worse than working for someone that you idolize, but you wonder why you're making all these mistakes and they don't. And I remember having this great conversation with the supervisor, and I was like, I don't get it. How do you always have the answers? And he was like, I don't. I have people who know the answers. And I'm about 80% right, because I have enough experience to have felt out the situation. And then the rest of it, we'll figure it out. And I was like, well, crap, you could have told me that a long time ago, because I've just been thinking you were perfect the whole time. So just be willing to be vulnerable, because people love to know that you're human. And that's what I think creates some of the best relationships, is the fact that we can all sit back and go, well, crap, that didn't work. What's next? Let's figure it out, and let's get there together.
As you talk about vulnerability, as you said, because I had that early in my career when I worked at a large corporation, and they had some issues around that. Like, it was about appearance and whatnot. And, they had that structure, and it was very competitive too. I'm kind of curious, like, how do you set that culture? And then number two, is there anything that you read or anything that you listen to, or people that have kind of shown you that way,
I live what I do. I live what I say. If there's something I'm telling you, if there's something I'm telling my teams, I do it. That's, the person I am right now, the person I am here, the person I am on LinkedIn, the person I am in a training, in a session, in a budget meeting, on a call, they're all like the same person. I am the biggest heart, the best intent, the greatest passion. But I'm human. I make mistakes, and I expect that other people do all of those same things too. And so I'm transparent, and I like to make sure that people know in those conversations that, yeah, like, I walked into this room and I do not remember what I came in here for. And I am okay with that, because I'm going to leave and come back later and figure it out too. And you should be okay with that too. And I think normalizing being human and being being in the midst of a busy business that we do, and not making all the right decisions, but doing it with the business in mind, doing it with the residents in mind, doing it, whatever you do is doing it with the bigger picture in mind, and the best intent is okay. It's usually not that big a deal, but I think when you normalize those things, that's how you create your culture. Your culture's in what you do, not in what I put on a placard on a wall, or what I put in a, in an email. It's what I do, and it's how we do it. And it's living that. When team members have hiccups and they come to me and go, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. And my answer is, why are you sorry? Like, nothing is broken. We're fine. We're totally fine. Yeah, it's not ideal. I wish it didn't happen. You clearly wish it didn't happen, but how do we now get out of it? Let's talk about it together. And that's what, to me, creates the culture and sets the path in action. And then I think you asked me something else, and I don't remember what that was either. But if you want to tell me, I'll be glad to answer that too.
You hit it on the head. It was culture and leading and in times of crisis, and perfectionism is rampant. I have a problem with it, right? It's just like, just go, knowing that you're going to be okay at 50% of the time. You're going to be wrong, but don't worry about it. And like you said, it's a two-way door. You can figure things out. So I love that. I love how you were sharing that. I mean, in terms of the crisis management, do you take people through experiences that you've had to share that? Like, do you kind of share with them, hey, you seem like you're trying to work too hard. Let me give you an example. Like, do you kind of share your vulnerability with your teams?
Oh, totally. And I got a story for everything. And I am first, I'm not shy. Secondly, I can talk for days. And I'm hyper transparent. And I think those are that's either really good or it's just really bad. And so I'm the first one to share it. I think you have to live by those examples. Like, okay, so this happened, I've seen this happen before, and here's what we did, or here's what happened, and it's going to be okay. Or I've seen this happen, and we've been through this. People are afraid to make mistakes. And I think they bring a lot of baggage. We all do. We bring baggage from home. We bring baggage from childhood. We bring baggage from friends and school and work and previous coworkers and whatever. And ultimately, every person we work with and work for are going to set a different expectation. My responsibility is to make sure that that, with me, with Acento, with our team, you're safe and that it's okay and that we make it relatable. It doesn't mean everything's okay, but it means, if you're working in honor of who we are, that mistakes are fine. So yeah, I share a lot. Sometimes maybe too much, but we seem to be all right. So I'm okay. And, I have this 80% rule. My teams would tell you any day of the week, if you are 80% confident, make a move. If you are 80% sure, make a move. There's nothing worse than analysis paralysis. Just make a decision and we will figure out the rest.
Jennifer, your experience with repositioning distressed assets is extensive. I'd like for you to share what are some most critical considerations for successfully turning around this type of assets in today's economic environment, and how do you prioritize improvements on a properties like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. My passion absolutely lies in it. And it lies there for two reasons. First, for the resident demographic. Most often when you're repositioning a distressed asset, it's, your residents are impacted first and foremost. They're living there. Both the ones that you don't want to keep having lived there and the ones that are living there who really likely can't make another move. But that's the whole reason you're there, is to impact their lives positively, but also for your investors, and for your owners. Ultimately, your first move is, what's the goal? Distressed is a broad term, and goals are subjective as well. And so what's your investor's goal? I can go in there and do a dozen different things, but that doesn't mean that I'm hitting the goal that's expected of whatever that transition is going to be. Is it occupancy? Is it income? Is it bad debt? Is it NOI? Is it, what is it? Is it renovations? Is it, 5 years or is it 10 years? Do I have 6 months or do I have a year? Do I have zero money? Do I have a lot of money? Like, really, you have to understand what it is, and ask the right questions and then make your plan from there. And, to me, I'm the, what's my money? What's my goal? What's my time frame? And I work backward. And so, I've had all of those scenarios along the way, and it's really just understanding the goal structure, because otherwise I'm just, I'm spinning wheels, giving you results that you weren't looking for to start with. So to me, that's my first avenue. Everything else is, how am I going to get there? And that, that's, leasing the right way, saving the right way, making money the right way, and prioritizing, what it's going to take to get to each one of those marks first, so that it feeds the rest of them.
There's always a lot of discussion too about the different partners, right? Whether it's the residents themselves, investors, property owners, and management, the on-site team especially. Like, how are you thinking about client relations, and how are you thinking about, bridging the gap between all of these different parties, and maybe strengthening it too? How are you thinking about improving the relationships, strengthening the relationships, and especially when it comes to client relationships?
No, absolutely. I think depending on your position, it's a battle, because I think if you're on site, you'd be, your client is the resident, and that's their mindset. And I think the higher you move in a company, you realize that your clients are, your clients are still your residents, of course, and they're also your employees. They're also your investors. And, you have to satisfy your investor obligations while also balancing all these relationships. And it's a hard balance, but I think the first piece is making sure that all your parties involved understand. If your managers only think that your residents are their only client, you have a problem. If your regionals think the only client is the employees and the residents, you have a problem. Everybody in the party needs to understand that your clients start with your investors all the way down and include your vendor partners. And so I'm satisfying all of them. Ultimately, though, my investors, I need to make sure that I'm making them the return that we promised. And that means I've got to do all the business, all the above that we've talked about. I've got to make sure that I'm in compliance with everything. I'm getting them the return based on the income of the property. I'm doing the business I'm supposed to do. I'm saving the money I'm supposed to save. And that's a really hard thing to do right now. Our primary focus in this market, some properties I have no limits, depending on the area we're in. I can increase, I can do what have you. The properties don't need as much as others. It's not really a big deal. Some properties I have maximum limits on income, and I've got inflation, and I've got all these other problems. And they're really, I'm just focused on retention. How can I keep you in your place? Because it's going to cost me a lot more, even if it's no increase. It's going to cost me a lot more to turn your apartment. And so maybe for a little bit, I'm just working on keeping people in place more so than I am this minimal increase that I would experience otherwise, and selling the resident on the fact that it's going to cost them more to move. And so, it's really adaptability. It's this ability to say that no matter, where I'm at, I'm able to pivot and adjust to make sure that I'm still meeting the expectations of everybody, all of my clients.
Jennifer, you are growing a company, you're growing a business. We're just talking about the situation offline. With your steady growth, could you share with us some challenges and maybe some lessons that you learned from scaling the business, from growing the business?
Absolutely. We've grown tremendously in the last few years. At one point during COVID, we were buying, 12 properties in a year and a half, which when everybody else was, sitting. This property, we've got a few closings coming up to be announced, but we got a few closings coming up in the short term. But I think it's the challenges right now are just really, for us, we're branching into areas that we're not in. And so it's establishing a footprint in areas that we either aren't in or don't have as big of a footprint in. And so it's making our name in places where people don't know us. But it's also then in, contract negotiation cost. We don't have a name down there. I can't call my regular vendor that I have a great relationship with and ask for help. They don't exist there. And so that's where I think some of our new ventures into mass contract negotiation was a really good move for us to know that we are securing the best price for the best service to in turn, again, give our best return. And so that plus, people, where we just talked about the labor shortages, retaining the people on those sites. We always go in and want to keep the team members there. People are valuable, their lives are valuable, and we don't take that very lightly at all. We don't take it lightly at all. And so, having them, keeping them, and making it worth it. So we can make sure we still keep taking care of the residents, but it's, people, product, price, same old, and managing it, just a different day and age.
Awesome. Love that. The P's. Just we had a dinner the other night where another CEO of a large ownership group was talking about, he's like, I'm all about the people, the process, the product. I got other people, I have people on my team who do the other things. So
we keep making things complicated, and technology makes it, and all these things are so changing, but really when we all just really get down to it, it's the same property management that it was in like 1995. We've just made it a little more complicated, but the basics are still the basics. And that's what keeps us all going in the right direction.
It's back to the basics, like you said, and just make a decision. You're going to have to change, go on the fly. I'm curious about, as you expand and you've seen multiple markets, you're based in the DC area, Maryland, you ride the federal, the state, the local laws. I'm curious on navigating all these regulatory changes, right? When almost like one state or one city wants to be unique or truly different. Are you seeing that it's getting more chaotic from market to market? Or do you see the opposite, that more markets are actually speaking to each other and the cities and states are saying, hey, we actually saw this is working in Georgia, or we saw this is working in Maryland. Let's be more consistent to make it easier for you. What are you seeing?
That's a dream world. Can they please all talk to each other and talk about what will work instead of just guessing and hoping somebody figures it out? Because no, I don't see that people are talking. And I do see, I think what I see more than anything, unfortunately, is we rely on our attorneys, on NAA, on other associations to keep us abreast, because things just change so often. And there are times where we're getting, multiple updates in a week on changes. And, where it was once state level and then it was city level, now it's even county level and even further, it's sub levels, and it's hard to keep up with. And no, there isn't one thing that's working. I think, one county might see something that another county does and goes, oh, maybe we should do that. But that didn't mean the first one was working or it was a good idea to start with. And now we're stuck with both. And it's not like they're testing it. It's like, let's do it for the next year. And we're like, oh, a year's a really a long time for us to bite this big bullet. Thanks. No, they're not talking. But if someone can make them talk, I'd be really happy. And I'm in that call.
Jennifer, one of the things that I'm thinking quite a bit lately is legacy. So I wanted to ask you, how would you like to be remembered? What would you like your legacy to be when it's all said and done?
Oh my gosh, that's like a deep question. Oh goodness. I've done a lot of things, but ultimately my biggest focus is my people and the people that I've come in contact with. And so I'd like to think that whether it's people who've worked with me or, that I've interacted with, that those people know that they matter and that I heard them and that I believed in them and that I wanted what was best for them. And whether it's with me, with somebody else, that I hear them and that they felt heard and that they felt that they mattered and that I would always be there for them and that I'd always be available. And that may sound very like fluffy and what have you, but ultimately I believe that I've gotten where I've gotten because of my willingness to always be there and my compassion and my empathy and my wanting to go the extra mile to see other people succeed and see their dreams come true. And that matters to me more than anything.
I love that. What's the greatest thing we can help you with right now? I mean, what's coming up? Is it a position? Is it knowledge? As you're expanding, an introduction? What can we in the audience help you with?
I would love, I think, an industry furthering conversation on, like we talked about with the employee shortages and challenges. I think that's a conversation worth having for everybody, and I don't think that I see that enough. I think there's so much tech out there. There's so much technology. There's so much AI, but an AI is not fixing your garbage disposal. It's not out there turning an apartment. And yeah, there's a service for that. But, ultimately, it's not answering my after hours calls. And so I would love deeper, bigger conversations and solutions on how we're supporting our on-site teams in areas that really do require real people to have real interactions and do real day-to-day work in an industry that needs better people and better exposure in the workforce market.
Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us today, for hanging out. It's been like a very fast hour for me. I would like to ask you to share some final thoughts with us and with the audience.
Make your presence known in the industry. Get out there. Be active in your associations and get to know people there, because it's a very small but very big world. Ask for your seat in the room. I say that everywhere I go, but ask for your seat in the room. Everybody wants, their seat at the table, but you got to get in the room first. And so ask for your seat in the room so you can hear what's going on and you can get to know more, because knowledge is absolutely everything. And you can't ask for something if you're not even there to ask for it. And so make your presence known and ask for the space that you deserve.
Chris Moreno, any final thoughts?
This is awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time and going deep. I think there were some awesome nuggets here to takeaways. So definitely excited. I know you're going to continue to grow the business and make an impact, and hope to see you next time we're in DC on Capitol Hill.
I would love to be there. Absolutely.
Everyone, thank you for hanging out with us today. Amazing conversation. Again, amazing guest. I want to thank our sponsors from Kairos and Cultivating Contractors for making this broadcast possible. We will see you all next Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, as always. Our guest is going to be the future president of the TAA, Texas Apartment Association, and a senior director with Greystar, Renee Zahn. So stay tuned. We'll be back Thursday at the same time, 3 p.m. Eastern. Have an amazing afternoon all.